owning your mistakes. Sometimes when we go through this, especially when we have kids, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. And you have to be careful when that happens, especially with your children, how you interact with them. And basically don't deny what happened, right? They know what they've experienced. They know what they've gone through. And it's going to hurt your credibility and your relationship with them if you try to convince them what happened or their perspective of it was wrong. That no, that didn't happen that way. You remembered it wrong or whatever. And it's tough, guys, right? Because a lot of times we do things that are embarrassing. We do things that we're not really proud of. Sometimes it's just you get caught up in the moment. This is especially important whenever you're leading up to the discard or the separation or divorce, whenever you may have been assuming a role in the relationship that you might have tendencies like the authoritarian type person or being the bad cop, in these situations. And it's typical that that's what happens, right? You get played to be a certain type of person in it. Your relationship with your kids develops around that. And then whenever you get into these situations or into the divorce, then that's going to be used against you. Well, you can't, like in my situation, I played the authoritarian person and I was the angry one and stuff like that. So I can't just come across and be like, well, that never happened, right? Now, just as a clarification, if you're in the midst of a court litigation and accusations are flying, then play your cards close to your chest, follow the advice of your attorney, and you don't necessarily want to add any more fuel or do anything to undermine your position. However, I will say that if you have made mistakes, and if they have evidence that demonstrates that you've made mistakes, then own it, own the mistake, and start doing things to make it better. If you have anger management issues, take anger management classes. If you, if whatever the situation is, if you have something that's a mistake and you can do something to try to rectify it or demonstrate to the court that you're rectifying it, that can actually help you. You can also use that as teaching moments with your kids to basically show that people can, in fact, change if they really want to. I know we tell people, and people are telling you that, people don't change. Your narc isn't going to change. And the caveat on that is what I just said at the end of it is if they really want to. If you're struggling with an issue and you want to change and you're taking proactive roles to do it, then yes, you do have the opportunity to change. I have the opportunity to change. You have the opportunity to change. And your children also have the opportunity to make a decision that they do not have to live life the way they did yesterday. Now, it's not that easy, right? You can't just get up one morning and decide you're going to change everything about yourself. You have to put in the work to do it, but it is possible to start making meaningful changes to yourself, to your environment, and demonstrate to your kids that their lot in life isn't this situation and isn't whatever they're dealing with. But, excuse me, I know that this is really tough, right? And we were talking about this the other day about how your buttons can get pushed and it can cause you to react or have a panic attack or some type of issue where your kids see it and then they internalize it thinking it's about themselves. This is not an easy process. You're not going to be able to master everything all at once, and you are going to have setbacks. I've had my own. I've talked about those on the channel, especially early on when I was struggling more with what was going on, not really understanding what I was dealing with, being wrapped up in the fear of potentially losing any opportunity to have a relationship with my kids, and it just kept my stress and anxiety level high. I also did silly things like checking my email and checking the mail whenever I got the kids, to where if some other flaming arrow was heading my way, it would trigger me. And you can't have something like that happen and then just ignore it. What I mean is if you're triggered on something, it's really hard and it takes a lot of practice to be able to set it aside and put it out of your mind. Your best bet is to not allow yourself the opportunity to get wrapped into that in the first place. So think about that as well. So to get back on this, what I mean is If you, let's say you've had anger issues towards your kids and you've exploded and yelled at them, well, you can't go back to them later and say, that it never happened, or well, you provoked me, you or whatever. Try to make excuses for it, because they'll see through it. They'll see that you're not genuine in what you're trying to say, and you're going to lose credibility with them and not work on building that stable foundation with them that we all need to be working on. When something happens, you need to be able to have a conversation with your kids, acknowledge their perspective on it, on what happened. Don't sit there and say, well, you said this to me, and because it reminds me of your mom, it made me angry, and that's why, right? Because then you're making an excuse for it. Bottom line, it was unacceptable. You shouldn't have done it. You wouldn't tolerate them doing it, and you shouldn't tolerate for yourself, right? It's really tough to do that. It's really hard, but it goes a long way to demonstrate that you're trying to make improvements, that you understand that your kids are going through things as well, and you're validating what they're going through, and you're trying to build a dialogue so that they can talk about it, right? Now, to be perfectly honest, like I said before, I didn't follow that, especially early on. There were times when things happened and it would devolve into not a good mess, or not a good situation. It would devolve into a mess. And it just complicates things, right? Especially when your ex is trying to portray you as this type of person. Every time you do something to validate what they're trying to say about you, it undermines your position. Now, your kids want to believe the best of you. They want to have your attention, have your love, have your support. But when they're being, either overtly or covertly conditioned to think you're a certain way, every time you fall into that trap, you're validating in their mind their reality. That, okay, the other parent, like in this situation, mommy is right, daddy is this way, he's always been this way, so that's just the way he is, right? And it's tough. I was talking to somebody earlier today that in our situations, we have to take both roles, right? If you are the stereotypical father, where you're the standoffish, non-emotional, authoritative person, you still need to keep some of that, but you also have to develop some of the nurturing side of that to be able to do both. The same thing on the flip side. If you have just been the nurturer and somebody else was responsible for structure or discipline, you have to take those roles as well. So it's a really complex balance, and it's not easy, right? It's not easy, especially when you've had a lot of time doing something and acting a certain way or playing a role. To sit there and have to take a step back and modify your approach is not easy. I'll tell you that one. It's tough, but it's critically important. And the good part about it is it makes your approach more balanced. And so on that, and it's really tough when you have a situation where, like, you have a blow up with one of your kids. You need to hopefully hold it together and be calm and rational. You still have firm boundaries, but to be able to communicate effectively with your kids and allow them to express themselves, okay? It's hard to do. It gets easier with time. And if you have a mistake, what you don't necessarily want to do is just sweep it under the rug with your kids and not acknowledge it, right? So, like, if I have, and it hasn't happened, I mean, it happens every once in a while. It hasn't happened in a long time. But when they do have, if you have a point where you backslide, you need to later go back and apologize for that. Say, hey, look, this is, I shouldn't have done it. I apologize. It's not the way I want to conduct myself. I want us to have good, open communication, and, it just, I messed up, right? And it's tough because even when I'm thinking about that, you want to make excuses. Don't necessarily try to make excuses. Just validate what happened, acknowledge that you're trying to do something different, and build the communication to where you can talk. And it works wonders. I mean, and what I will tell you is I've even had that situation where, like with my oldest, he's gotten to the point where he'll try to push my buttons on some things. Now, if I'm having a really bad day, it's not a good mix, but demonstrate with your own action how things are, right? You know how the narcissist or the suspected narcissist acts, so let them undermine themselves. So work on your side to continue to build that relationship and that level of trust. And even if they're poking you in the eye and trying to say, well, you do this, and you're not doing it right then, they let the story present itself. You don't have to necessarily lay it out for them. It's really hard. It's just another one of those things that we have to deal with. And I wanted to talk about it just because I know there's a lot of times you don't really necessarily want to admit when you made a mistake. You don't want to acknowledge it. It'd be better off just like, okay, well, I'll never do that again. So I won't do it again, so I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to acknowledge it. I just won't do it again. Well, the problem is that then you're not confronting it, you're not dealing with it, and you're not creating that open communication. And then it's like, okay, well, what are you then? Are you, Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde? I mean, you need to be able to establish those communication lines and levels of trust with your kids to be able to deal with things. Plus, the other good part about this, I mean, I was talking about teaching moments before, but you're also teaching your kids how, like conflict resolution tactics and issues with that, which they need that going into adulthood. Because if they fall in the same trap that we did, where you just brush things under the rug and you don't really acknowledge them, or you pretend they're not there, if they think that that's the normal way to deal with it, then that's the way they're going to go into it, and that sets them up when they go into adulthood to basically replicate what we did. And that's one of the fundamental things that we're trying to do, is we're trying to mitigate the damage of this entire situation and give them the skill sets so when they become young adults, that they do not fall into the same traps and they do not surround themselves with the same type of toxic people that we probably were surrounding ourselves with. And you got to keep in mind that part of this relationship is still, or their relationship with the parents, with their other parent, is still in that toxic mode. So they're still getting that influence. So the more skill sets we can provide them, the more opportunities to have them be able to have a better boundaries for themselves, better communication skills, better understanding, better self-care, and feeling good with themselves, not feeling like they have to make someone else like them, to be able to provide that validation of their self within themselves is really important. And we play a huge role in that. So on that, if you want to talk about this, add your comments in the comment section below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, please subscribe. If you haven't gone over to the Dad Surviving Divorce website and sign up for the newsletter, please do that. If you're not getting those newsletters, please make sure that you add me into your contacts, or mark the emails not as spam, because that's been happening to some people. And I will chat with you guys in the next video. So take care.